Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Power Hungry Podcast. I'm Robert Bryce. On this podcast, we talk about energy, power, innovation, and politics. And I'm pleased to welcome my guest, Shreya Jai. She is a journalist based in Delhi, India. She is an assistant editor at Business Standard. Shreya, welcome to the Power Hungry Podcast.
Thank you so much, Robert. I'm very delighted to come here. I do listen to your podcast and I love it. I love the content that is there. You have some amazing lineup of guests. So thank you so much for having me here.
No, it's my pleasure. So I did warn you, Shreya, that the guests, as you know, introduce themselves. So if you don't mind, imagine you've arrived somewhere, you don't know anyone, and I do mean no one, and you have maybe 45 or 60 seconds. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. As Robert told, I'm Shreya Jai. I am a journalist. I write on the energy sector for Business Standard newspaper in Delhi, and I've been writing on this sector for close to a decade now. It's a very interesting sector. Currently my focus has been on renewable energy, India's energy transition, and our climate goals, something that has been making news worldwide, and it's a very interesting area to be in. And when I'm not chasing megawatts and million tons, I love walking around old and new Delhi. And I love writing poetry, love writing and reading poetry in Hindi. That is something I enjoy. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to talk to Robert here.
Oh, well, that's great. So I mispronounced. It's Shreya Jai, not Jai.
Yeah,
Shreya Jai. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So broadly, you talked about the energy transition in India, and I'm no expert on India. I've been there once. It was now 5, 6 years ago almost now. So what are the key challenges, if we could just start there? Because as you know, and I do as well, India is very coal dependent for electricity. A couple of quick facts for the people who are listening and not familiar with India. Per capita electricity consumption is about 800 kilowatt hours per capita per year. It's about a quarter of the global average, which is about 3,100 kilowatt hours. So India still has a lot of challenges ahead, but I just wanted, I won't give you any more numbers, but I just wanted to throw that out. So what are the biggest challenges that you see, Shreya, in terms of just providing basic energy, and then when you come to talking about a transition to other forms of energy?
Sure. Let's take this question in two parts. One would be a macro challenge, and other would be the micro challenges. So at macro level, something that you very rightly mentioned, India is a coal dependent country. Close to 75% of our electricity demand rather, is met by coal. And that seems to be a backbone. Our whole power grid infrastructure, power supply infrastructure is also built around coal. That would not seem like a big challenge because for the past 3 decades or so, we have been dependent on coal. And recently we have electrified all our households and we are getting a decent amount of power supply according to the government claims. But the challenge emerges in terms of what India's own set of targets are. We have set an ambitious target when it comes to our climate commitments. We have committed 500 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity addition in the coming decade. And we currently stand at around 100 gigawatts. So that's a huge target. And having said that, we have taken leaps in renewable energy capacity addition. And when I say renewable energy, I mean solar and wind, where the majority of investment and policy focus has been in the past decade or so. I would say 2 decades, but solar has grown in this past decade. So that has been primarily the focus. Now the challenge emerges that as I mentioned earlier, the infrastructure in all these years was built around coal. So renewable faces that challenge first. Second, obviously, is money. Traditionally, money has always flowed into the fossil fuel based industries, be it coal mining, thermal based power production. So at macro level, this is the big challenge, that though the country, the policymakers do have an intention to take that leap from coal to green energy, and the growth has been impressive. In terms of target, it looks small, but till yet, it is an impressive growth to see that much amount of capacity addition. In 2008-9, solar was 2 gigawatt. Currently, I think we stand at around 45 gigawatt or something. So it's pretty impressive that way. Tariffs have fallen from 17 rupees. We are at 2 rupees. It went sub 2 rupees as well per unit. So the growth has been impressive, but when we look at this number of 500 gigawatt, I don't think the infrastructure is ready. I can explain that later, but yeah, that is a macro challenge. Then I come to the micro part. You must have read these headlines that India is now 100% electrified. All households of this country are electrified, which again is an impressive feat. It took years in making, but yes, we finally did it. But that does not translate into reliable power supply. There are still remote areas, there are still villages which receive 12 hours or less than 12 hours or even lesser power supply. So that is one challenge. Though infrastructure wise we are connected, all households are connected to the national grid somehow, but that energy security is missing. So that is a micro challenge, which is a challenge for a country of this size, which has remote locations, which has remote villages, which are not even connected by roads, and we are connecting them by electricity grid. So it would be a challenge to connect them, to meter them, and the biggest challenge would be to ask them to pay their bills, electricity bills, in a country where free power is a political promise. So I think if I look at micro level, that is a big challenge, and the challenge also emerges from the fact that electricity sector in India follows a federalist structure where generation and transmission of electricity comes under the center, whereas distribution of electricity to the household comes under the state. And that's where a lot of clashes emerge. That's where a lot of issues emerge. A trickle down effect of losses happen. States have their own policies. Center tries to push reforms, or state tries to put their own reforms, but due to layers of bureaucracy, layers of federal structure, reforms do get lost. Something that has happened time and again in the electricity sector, that reforms have been initiated, but they have not reached their last mile or reached where they should have been. So that is a micro challenge there, and I'm happy to elaborate on any of it that you want.
Sure. So just to talk about that part about the free electricity, because I was reading your piece that you published in Business Standard about the elections in Uttar Pradesh. I'm saying that correctly, I hope.
Yeah, it's Uttar Pradesh, yes.
Okay.
The northernmost state. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm in Texas, so you'll have to forgive my pronunciation on some of these things. But it was just I thought it was interesting that this issue of free electricity, right? That this is something that is politically popular, but in terms of the reliability of the grid, it's terrible because, as I've said, if people are going to use electricity, the only way it's going to be sustainable, and by that I mean over time, is that people pay for the power that they use. But yet, it seems like in Uttar Pradesh that the farmers are a big voting bloc, and this idea of free electricity really appeals. Is that so? Politicians are promising it, but can they really deliver? Explain the politics of that.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's a very pertinent issue. It's not new for politicians to promise free electricity. It has been going on since decades, since as long as I remember. Politically, how much they can commit or not is a question left best unanswered, because the politicians promising free electricity are not the ones deciding that. There's a whole regulatory regime that decides it, and once a sitting MP, a sitting member of parliament decides to offer free electricity, the electricity supply company just adds one more slab into their tariff, saying that this section of the population will get free electricity. But that has a far-reaching, a domino effect kind of thing on the financials of the power distribution company. And let me explain it in this way. Let me take an example of Uttar Pradesh only. Some of the discoms, distribution companies, abbreviated as discoms, have more than 50 tariff slabs. Can you imagine that there are 50 type of consumers for which that particular company has to decide tariffs for, and most of them would be free. So if you
I'm sitting here. My jaw is dropping. You're saying, so here in the U.S. we have residential, we have commercial, and we have industrial. Or and generally speaking, in most
that's how it is. And then
you have three different groups.
And then in agriculture, there would be one for the fisheries. One would be for maize cropping. One would be for rice cropping. In the industries, there would be one for large industries, small industries, micro industries, and things like that. So
Well,
yeah,
it
so
must
there are
be, that
multiple
sounds
slabs.
just incredibly difficult to
Yes, it is,
manage
and it is
to just
amazing.
keep them straight.
Regulators for years have been saying, if you search on regulators' notice, for years they say that there should be a tariff slab rationalization. Just collect all slabs, make them one, give them one tariff. It's such a headache. All these tariff submissions are run into 600 pages. So if you have to learn that what is the tariff a particular farmer is paying in this a city, or for that matter a state, you have to run through 600 pages to understand. But the summary of that 600 pages is always dismal, especially for states like Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Haryana has still improved. And it is the same story every year, that they are loss making, and they are loss making because they cannot recover the subsidy that they offer. uh, on an average, thermal power costs rupees 4 on an average, rupees 4 per unit. Let's take a thumb value of rupees 4 per unit, and you're supplying power for free to 20 to 30% of your consumers. How are you supposed to recover that cost? And it is not stable, that 4 rupees. During a monsoon season, you have to procure hydro. There are seasons when there's low power, so you have to procure costlier power. On top of it, you are making losses because there is no infrastructure development that is happening, because you do not have any additional revenue to invest into infrastructure development. So whatever the line losses that are happening because of bad infrastructure, that also is getting accounted into your financial losses. Because if you're supplying 100 units, only 70 units is reaching, that 30 units is it's a straight loss for the distribution companies. So that also gets added into the financial losses. So it's a whole vortex of subsidy loss that the governments repeatedly have been trying to break. In 2014 there was a
Can I
scheme
stop you there?
launched.
I love
Yeah,
that
sorry.
line. The vortex of subsidy loss. I mean, that is that. But I want to just follow on that, because what you just said is that so for any business, if you're losing 30% of your revenue or your product right off the top, I mean, how can you possibly make it, over the long term? And just to be clear on that 30% loss, now some of that is because it's being given away, and some of it is, in my reporting in India, there, in some areas there's just a lot of theft, and I saw it myself in rural areas in South 24 Parganas, and that there's just a lot of people tapping the line. So is the 30% loss? It's not that it's that important, but how much would be theft, and how much is just that they're giving it away to farmers and politically favored groups?
I think the portion of theft has come down considerably, but I will still place it around 10% or so for states which are repeated offenders. But energy theft has come down significantly because of infrastructure development, because of lot of metering and everything. So energy theft does come down, but the billing efficiency is another problem. I'm sorry, I'm throwing so many acronyms at you. Billing efficiency is pretty low. You are not able to recover the electricity bills, and that is a challenge. That bill is generated, the customer is metered, but you're not able to recover the bills, and it is a challenge in remote areas for a state as large as UP, and which has remote villages, districts, where there is not enough electricity staff to go and recover bills, because not everything is online. So that also in the end hurts your bottom line, I guess. So there are multiple level of challenges. So you're right about energy theft, but the good thing is that it has significantly come down in the past many years because of infrastructure development. But that remains a key reason, yes.
Sure. But back to I interrupted you, and I apologize for that, but I interrupt a lot. But it's just that
no problem.
The 70%, 30%. So as for the discoms, as you call them, the distribution companies, is it a general rule of thumb that then at the state level they're losing 30%? Is that kind of across India, or is that in UP or just to certain states, or can you even make that kind of a generalization about the discoms and the amount of revenue that they're able to make off of the what they sell? 70%, is that a rule of thumb?
No, I don't think so. There are some states that are much better. Gujarat is a shining example. I mentioned Haryana. Haryana has made a lot of improvement in past these many years. I'm just citing data from the government websites where Uttar Pradesh Discom seems to be having operational losses of 32%. which has actually increased rather than declining. So that is one example. So it is not a general thumb rule. There are discoms which do not have operational losses or which are financially profit making. Even inside Uttar Pradesh, there are two distribution companies which are in green. Rest three are in red in terms of financial losses, though their operational losses continue to be high. So it's not a thumb rule, but but if operational losses are high, it is in most cases symptomatic that there's a larger problem there. So if you go into more details of these particular discoms, you will find a lot of skeletons there.
Sure. And so talk about the farmers and why they're such a powerful voting bloc, and why I know, again, I've been to India only once, but there's very little, there's just a lot of farming, a lot of agricultural activity everywhere. And even though it's a very large country with a large population, I didn't see a lot of just open, unoccupied area. It's a densely populated country. But it's a sidebar. So tell me about why the farmers, as a lobby group, as we call them here in the U.S., why they're so powerful.
I would not call farmers as a lobby group as of yet in India, but I would call them an easy political target rather.
Okay.
These SOPs that are being offered to them, not SOPs rather,
favors, considerations.
Yeah, favors rather is just to, win their votes.
Right.
I don't think farmer groups or lobbies have ever gone and asked about free power. They will not refuse it. So my colleague who was on the ground in Uttar Pradesh, he did talk with people, and they said that they are happy with whatever electricity supply they're getting at their home, and they're happy to pay whatever little bills they get, because obviously the consumption is not that much, but they want free power for their tube bills, because electricity doesn't come, it's not a reliable electricity supply, so they have to spend on diesel, which is costlier. So they said ki might as well supply us electricity and supply it for free, because we are producing and we are not getting enough rates for our agriculture produce. So I think farmer thinks from that kind of mindset, that whatever produce I'm selling, I'm not able to recover that, so why should I not get electricity for free? I think this mindset has pushed politicians to keep offering electricity and also water, something that we ignore in these discussions, as free. And then it leads to a lot of wastage. That is another discussion altogether. But my personal opinion is that this is a very, very easy election promise that is being made without any thought process. I don't think that kind of maturity to treat electricity and water as economical, or rather I say treat them as economics, has not emerged as economic sectors. They are not political sectors, they are economic sectors. You have to treat them in an economical way with a financial outlook. That is yet to emerge in a section of politicians, I guess.
And it's easy for the politicians to say, well, I'll give you free electricity, but they're not running the discoms, right? So they can say it's not their problem, right? Is that fair?
Yeah. And just it's okay if you're promising free electricity. There's no problem in offering, but one has to change the way electricity is promised as free. I will cite one example here. I think in 2018, Bihar, which also has a lot of farming population and which was for several years infamous for offering free electricity to whoever, it changed the whole slab structure of its electricity bills. It removed all subsidy portions from electricity bills for all possible consumers, rural, commercial, industrial, everyone. And then it made a tabulation on who all deserves free electricity. And they were given direct benefit transfer, DBT. Basically, if I am entitled to receive free electricity, I will get that particular amount of my electricity bill as a direct amount in my account bill. So my electricity bill will have no subsidy. My discoms will have to offer me no subsidy. My discom will bill me as I consume for whatever units of electricity I consume, and whatever I pay, the state will reimburse it back into my account. So the discom continues to act as a financial entity. My electricity bill continues to be a financial structure, but the state, which has promised me free electricity, is giving me money directly into my account, and that also plugs a whole lot of losses in the whole supply chain of
I
subsidy.
see.
So
I
I think
see.
that is a very great example on how you can offer sops, and also how you can make a good example out of it, like a good policy out of it.
Because the company is not then being taxed in an
Yeah,
indirect
yeah.
way, that the government is saying, okay, well, here's a subsidy directly in cash to the individual consumer, but that doesn't affect the viability of the discom or so on. Bihar is interesting. As I recall, and I was just looking it up. It's one of the most populous states, one of the biggest states in India. It's also one of the poorest, is it not? Is that right?
Yep.
And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I think a DBT like a structure works there. Because you can clearly identify the set of consumers who deserve that kind of subsidy. And I will juxtaposition it to another example of Delhi. Starkly different example. It's an urban city. The if we were to tabulate rich and poor index, Delhi would be much closer to the rich index compared to Bihar. Now Delhi also has a power subsidy structure. Delhi follows another structure. Delhi's rule is that till 200 units of your consumption is free. If you are consuming whatever amount, 0 to 200, I will reduce your bill by 50% free, and 200 to 400 is 50%. Now my bill is 400 units. I am much better positioned to pay my electricity bill of however amount it comes to. I am very much in a position, but my bill comes 0. Why? Rather than that, it should be the other way around, that you need to identify the set of consumers who cannot even pay those 500 or 200 rupees. They are the ones who should be entitled for that kind of subsidy. So I think a DBT kind of model, direct benefit transfer kind of model, identifies consumers in terms of their socio-economic structure, and then gives them subsidy, which I believe is kind of a effective model, though a lot of experts have pointed out errors in that as well. But compared to this direct subsidy on the basis of consumption and other ways of political promises, I think this is a much more efficient way. If you were to ask me, I'll say that.
Sure. Well, as you're saying that, it occurs to me, and I only I was in Kolkata. I spent some time in Delhi, and a little bit in Rajasthan, in Jaipur, along with my family now 6 years ago. But India is also, as I'm just thinking about this, and I pulled up a map because I realized, well, it's such a big country and it's so varied that Gujarat is, as I understand, is a very prosperous state, right? So it's very much different from Bihar. So to talk about these together, well, it's not really the same. Is that? I mean, how do you think about that in India in all the varied regions? Because it's a quite diverse and very geographically different country, and yet it seems like it would be very difficult to manage. And you've already mentioned this conflict between the central government and the states. How do you see that or how does that affect energy policy? I guess is finally get to a question. How does that affect energy policy? And are you even able to keep up with all these different varied interests in states?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. It is actually very difficult to enforce a singular policy across the states. In 2014, there was a policy called Uday. I will not tell you the full form
Okay.
because it's very difficult. It's called Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana. So Uday, it was launched, and it was to revive the power distribution segment in all the states, and all states came on board. It had a carrot and a stick approach. It basically said that if you do this much improvement in infrastructure, this much money would be given to you, or this much money will not be given to you. Very interesting approach. Very interesting. The only shortfall it had was that it gave a singular target to all the discoms across all the states. And that is the reason it did not work. Like the states which were already improved, got all the money and improved much more. But the states which were slow starters, or which were facing a lot of problems at their own backyard, could not, even be closer to the kind of target that they had set. So now they have tweaked the scheme a bit. And now they are asking states to come forward, tell us every 6 months, what will you do? What is your near term, short term, long term improvement targets across board? Infrastructure, loss reduction, subsidy, changing your electricity bills, little, small, big things. Tell us that. Tell us how much money you need. And as you improve, like a kid's report card, I'll give you a candy. So if you improve by 5%, you get 5% money from that institution.
Right.
If you improve by 10%, oh, you get 20%, and then you get a grant as well. So this has just been launched. This looks promising because now the onus lies on the state. If you do not improve, no financial institution will give you money. I think the center is in talks with banks as well. If you do not improve the state of electricity in your particular area or distribution company, no one will give you loan as your working capital. No one will give you money to run your projects. And I think this would be a much tighter ship to run at. Coming back to your question, yes, that makes energy policy a lot of difficult, because now the states which are not ruled by the same political party which is in the center are opposing to this particular policy.
Right.
And there is a high chance that they would not like to come on board on this. Now, for them, it is of no loss, but look at the loss of an electricity consumer. The kind of reforms that other states would take up, or the kind of infrastructure development that would happen in other states, might not happen in these states because the political mindset does not align. So that is a challenge that this federal structure creates. But at the same time, not criticizing any of these states, this federal structure also keeps the center in check, that the center should not have an overarching power over this. Like some of the provisions of a recently revised bill also entail that center will have a larger role in appointing regulators, in appointing authority, something that the states massively oppose. That why should the states, a center should have that kind of overarching powers, and the center had to revise that. They dropped that plan. So a good federal structure keeps check and balance. But yes, it leads to a lot of challenge. The center has to push a lot on the reforms, and I think the states have to take up on their own these reforms. And the reason I mentioned Gujarat was that only, that when Gujarat decided to reform its electricity sector, there was no scheme as such running from the center pushing you to reform yourself. But Gujarat did it because they wanted to reform the electricity sector. So this is an example that a lot of researchers and bureaucrats always cite, that Gujarat is an example that you're self-motivated state and you take up your reforms and just change the whole
But it's a different state from everything that I know. I mean, it's much wealthier, more educated. It's a coastal state, so it has these different qualities relative to the inland states and so on. Just a quick station break. So again, my guest is Shreya Jai. She is an Indian journalist. She's based in Delhi. She's an assistant editor at the Business Standard. She's on Twitter. That's the easiest way to find her. Shreya_J. Shreya is SHREYA_JAI. She's also the host of the India Energy Hour podcast. So we talked about subsidizing agricultural use and particularly for irrigation, because that's a big issue for farmers and the electricity costs related to that. But let's talk about coal versus renewables and nuclear, because and I've been an advocate for nuclear energy for a very long time. Nuclear is moving forward in India, but you talked about the energy transition really in terms of renewables. I want to come back to renewables, but can you give me an update about what's going on with the nuclear sector in India? Because it seems like it's been there have been some contracts, there's been some development, but like everywhere else, it's moving somewhat slowly. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is pretty slow. And in past many years, I've not seen very aggressive focus on nuclear as such. I think bounded by global treaties and also whatever global mishaps that happened, especially after Fukushima, a lot of development in the nuclear sector was stalled, if I can use that word. Kudankulam has been moving, but at a very slow pace. It also faced a lot of local protests, as you might know. So there have been developments in nuclear, but very slow. And also when we talk about the government's energy policy, or energy basket per se, I have not seen any great numbers promising a growth of nuclear. And in the past 5 6 years, the focus has been so much on solar and wind, that nuclear, and for that matter even hydro, even gas, are pretty sidelined. Yeah.
That the focus is much more on the renewable side. So tell me about that then. What about, I know that there's been some, well, I'll ask it directly. So have there been much in terms of land use conflicts with the siting of wind and solar? Because as I noticed, I mean, there's just not a lot of open available land. There are people in pretty much every corner of India from what I saw. Are land use issues a conflict when it comes to the siting of large renewable projects?
Yeah, there have been incidents where land is a big concern. Rajasthan was identified, the state of Rajasthan was identified as a prime location for renewable energy, where there is a lot of, arid land which can be utilized for putting up large solar parks. Solar generating units, but that is also facing a lot of ecological challenges because it happens to be a bird catchment area, or in eco-sensitive zone. So that kind of challenges are there. In Karnataka also, a lot of solar power project developers are facing challenges from local farmers, which claim that the land is usable. So there are land challenges, and that in the end leads to increase in price of solar power. So you're absolutely right. In India, where land is such scarce, how do people are affording this kind of land? So it is a challenge. But for now, the government policy seems that they want to focus on grid connected large solar power plants. Personally, I feel that solar should be decentralized, but land is a major, major challenge in this country. And if we do not focus on decentralized rooftop solar program, it would become a bigger problem in the coming future, because whatever solar parks were identified, they have come up. So going forward, if one were to set up large solar parks or so wind farms, the land is not available. In wind, there is another challenge. All the good windy sites are gone. Whatever are there are semi good windy sites. That means additional investment into taller, stronger wind turbines that in the end increases the cost of wind power. So yeah, the challenge of land is definitely there.
So tell me, you made that one quick comment about that you were more in favor of a decentralized approach, microgrids, and I've seen you've written about microgrids in some of your recent articles. Tell me why you see that approach, and does that include batteries? How do you think of those microgrids for particularly rural areas? And I've as I said, I've been in India once and been in some rural areas, but didn't see many solar panels. Is that where the growth is really happening with solar in India?
See, for a country which took 70 years to electrify all of its households, how are we planning to take solar to all these households is something that baffles me. Our national grid has
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure. What do you mean by that? I'm just curious, if you don't mind.
So all our households were electrified just 2 years back, 3 years back, rather, 2019.
Sure. Yeah.
So these many years it took for the national grid to reach the households, for a power line to reach a household.
Right.
So you imagine the vast expanse of network creation it would have taken. Now renewable poses another challenge. Renewable will not only disturb the grid structure, renewable would also entail another round of grid infrastructure creation, so that it can exist in sync with the conventional power sources. That is one major challenge. Second, the areas where solar and wind projects are coming up are not necessarily the consumption centers. I'll go back to the example of Gujarat, which is also another prime wind and solar site. Gujarat has surplus supply. It has so much energy that it can sell to at least one more full state, and there is no robust line connecting the western grid to north or the eastern part of the India. So you understand the challenge, that there is a whole land here which has surplus energy which cannot be taken to another parts, and then obviously there are regulatory challenges attached to it as to how much power they can sell from their estate. So why not have solar where it is consumed? Why not it should be on my rooftop? Why should it not be on a farm where a farmer can run his irrigation pump from solar? Why should he rely on grid connected power, which is unreliable? And why should he spend money on diesel when he can like install a solar panel and a battery preferably and run his motor? And solar by its nature is decentralized, I believe. When something is so cheap, when you do not have to set up a power plant like thermal, or set up a turbine, or create a dam. So when something is so simple as just putting up a solar panel, why create this whole infrastructure around that to make it costlier, to make it much more inaccessible? Why should it be done? If there are sunny days in Gujarat, there are sunny days in Uttar Pradesh, in Maharashtra, in Jharkhand. There's sunny days everywhere. It's just that the irradiation is different, but still, how much different would it be? You save so much of line loss, you save so much of infrastructure, investment into infrastructure that is being created, and you're taking solar where it is needed. And I think by doing that, you also change the mindset, probably. Germany is a great example. Germany started investment into solar with decentralized. Every rooftop would have solar. When they were done with that, that's when they decided to have to invest into other sources of energy. I think it is a great example. I think something similar should be done in India. You mentioned there's crunch of land. There clearly is. There are so many rooftops to cover. There are so many farmlands to cover. I think it should be done. The government has initiated some programs. There have been slow success in that, but my personal opinion is that solar by its nature is decentralized, and it should be where it is consumed.
Sure. Well, and you mentioned high voltage transmission lines, which is another constraint, right? And on the grid network, especially here in the U.S., right? There's a lot of talk. Oh, well, we'll just build a lot of high voltage transmission without any understanding of. Well, that's really hard. I mean, it's really difficult because of of land use conflicts. So we've touched on the coal business a little bit. And one of the things that was interesting in the COP meeting in Glasgow was India, among other countries, fought the provision to say that there was going to be a phase out of coal, and instead that the change was made to phase down, I think was the phrase that was ultimately agreed upon. So I know that India's coal sector is very also politically powerful, and it's also politically powerful because it's one of the biggest, or the Indian rail network is also a huge employer, and India's rail moves a lot of coal. So how quickly do you think the country can move away from coal? Is there a phase out or a phase down, or is there a target for reducing from 70% to another? And what is that?
There's no official target for phasing down coal
Okay.
as of yet. There have been government projections about when will coal demand in the country would start going down, and that starts 2040 to 2045 onwards. And I'm citing very different studies, but this is the range. And this is when our coal demand is forecasted to peak at around 2030 to 2032. So we can safely say that another 2 decades, coal is not going anywhere away in this country. Coal is here to stay. And yes, we have planned we do have a net zero plan, but me and you both know that it's a very long term plan. We have given the target year of 2070. That is too far. Government's own projections, as I mentioned, say that at least till 2040, coal will not see a decline. There are some more optimistic projections which say that after peaking in 2030 to 2035, we might see a decline. But that is dependent on a whole lot of factors. One major being renewable energy coming to fore. So we actually have to keep a track on how renewable energy development takes shape in this country, along with energy storage and obviously grid infrastructure. But to summarize my answer again, no, coal is not going anywhere anytime soon in this country.
Well, and I noticed from, I believe it was a piece that you wrote in the last few days, that in fact the government was now requiring the generators to have a certain amount of coal on site, right? That this was a new rule that was published. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So this rule had a genesis. Last year, there was a coal crisis around August to October 2021. A lot of factors led to that. There was extended monsoon, demand shot up because the economy opened up after the COVID second wave, something that the power generating companies did not envisage. They did not have that much amount of coal stock, so they started demanding more coal, something that the coal companies cannot afford to do during monsoon season because they cannot mine or supply more coal during that season. So that was the genesis, and on the basis of that, the government decided that power plants should have some stock of coal with them, so that if a rainy day literally happens, they have enough stock at their end, and rather than play blame game. But if you take a bird's eye view on this matter, this situation emerged because of a simple reason, because the demand shot up, and demand hereafter, God forbid if there's no another COVID or pandemic wave, demand is going to increase. A very 5 to 6% is the estimate of annual electricity demand growth in the country. The government is expecting double-digit growth, but even at 5 to 6% growth entails huge amount of coal demand. Back of the hand calculations would say that if we consume close to 600 million tons of coal this year, if our electricity consumptions increases by 5 to 6% every year it increases by 100 to 150 million ton every year. We would be touching 1 million ton of coal demand soon then. So coal demand, electricity demand is here to increase.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that was, that's what I've been reading, and the snapback in demand for coal globally, in the U.S., in Europe, in India, in China, but at 6% growth, that's you're doubling every 12 years. I mean, this is a very rapid rate of growth, but it seems like, is that just fed, the main driver is that India, starting from such a low base, you still, yes, people may have a little bit of electricity, but once you get a little bit, then you want a washing machine or a refrigerator. That this is the natural progression, right? This is the way it happened in the United States. This is the way it's happened in every country that's electrified. It's the start from a slow base, and then women in particular are in the home and start using more appliances. But the air conditioning is the other big key. So what are I'm rambling here, but what are the key drivers in that electric demand growth?
You are absolutely right. In India, industrial demand growth is given a lot of importance. That if there's a growth in demand of industrial demand, that will play a huge role in pushing the demand. But I think household demand is something that we have to factor in. We are claiming that we have connected all our households. What happens when those households start getting 18 to 24 hours power supply? Just imagine 18 hours power supply, and obviously there is an aspirational value that comes along with electricity, as you mentioned, that once I have electricity, why should I use it just for bulb or for charging my phone? Everyone has a smartphone, everyone's phones are charging, everyone would want to have a TV, a refrigerator, might not be an AC in rural areas, but what stops them from getting that? Electricity does get that kind of aspirational value in your life, where you want to buy and invest electrical appliances. So household demand will definitely shoot up in India. We are India's statistics bet a lot on industrial demand, and for sure industrial demand is a bulk demand driver in the whole basket of electricity. But I think going forward, we need to keep an eye on household demand, because that is one thing that will push the demand further. So yeah, I completely agree with you what you said.
Well, and I'm working from memory here. I think it's in my last book. I'm not remember off the top of my head, but it's something, a very maybe single-digit percentages of Indian households have air conditioning now. and that air conditioning growth, the growth of sales of air conditioners was growing something like 12% a year, which means it doubling every 6 years. Well, that's a big driver of electricity demand. Air conditioning all over the world is a big driver. But is that, well, let me ask you personally, did you grow up in a house with air conditioning when you were a child?
Yes.
Oh, you had it, but you grew up in, did you grow up in Delhi?
No, Kanpur. It's in Uttar Pradesh.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
but was that? But did everyone you know? Did they have air conditioning? Was this common among in the
No.
area around you when you were a child? Tell me
For
about
several
that.
years, there were power cuts for days.
Power
So
cuts for
my
days
house in Kanpur got AC, I think just 3 or 4 years back.
in Kanpur. This is where your
Yeah.
your family
Yeah, and
lives.
and the only reason was that there was, there was no reliable power supply. What my father would say, what would I do with an AC if there's no electricity supply? So once the electricity supply stabilized and they realized, no, we get 22 hours power supply, that's when they decided to get an AC. So, but but
and you're-
4 years
and
back
you're-
was
and-
there.
and
Now
you're-
you
and-
imagine
and-
a village. So
Yeah, and you're talking
it's
about your
really
parent.
cool.
You're talking about your parents now.
Yeah.
They're still living
Yeah.
in Uttar Pradesh. So,
Yeah.
but just remind me. So I just want to be clear. So that you had a connection to the grid when you were a child, but the electricity wasn't reliable.
No, no.
So it was how many days a week would you have power when you were growing up?
I think when I was pretty young, situation was pretty worse. There were power cuts for 1-2 days in a row. And then, a power cut of typically 6 to 7 hours a day became a norm. Till the time I left, yeah, that was the norm. But now it's pretty good. It's pretty good out there. 2 hours barely, and you get an SMS when there's a power cut. So it's pretty much good there. The electricity company in Kanpur is one of the profit making companies, and they're good. So now things have improved.
So tell me then, when you were a child, did your mother then have a washing machine? Was that part of your household, or did she wash clothes by hand? I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I report on in my book and
We all
the film
used
that
to
we
wash
did.
our clothes.
You did by hand.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And does your
But-
mother have a
But
washing
yeah,
machine?
we did get a washing machine, yes, because you can time washing machine with the time that the electricity supply would be there. So yeah, we did have a washing machine. We did not have AC, no. We did have those huge desert coolers, if you had seen when you visited India. So yeah.
So, but
and,
when
and also AC as a necessary household item, that trend has also come in the last decade, if I'm not wrong, in the country. It was a very, very industrial or very metro city phenomena. AC had reached tier 2, tier 3 cities in the last decade only, I guess. That's my guess.
say
I'm
say
not
that
sure.
again. I didn't quite understand what you meant by that.
I said that AC as a necessary household item has emerged in the last decade.
I see. Okay,
only.
gotcha.
Yeah, it was not a necessary item. So I'm not sure if we can directly link it to electricity supply, but as a necessary item, it has emerged only in the last decade.
I see.
I would also blame climate change for it a bit,
Okay.
and obviously advertising agencies. It wasn't that much a necessary item till
Sure.
yet.
And so I just want to make sure. So when you were growing up, now you wash clothes by hand. About when did you get your family get a washing machine?
I can't recall, but it was there for quite some time. I think I was pretty young. I think we got it in the 90s, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, we did.
So there were several years where, as a child,
Late 90s or so, I think we did.
So you can remember your mother washing clothes by hand.
Yeah, I do, yes.
Well, see,
Yeah, but we did get it.
I just
This
think this
huge,
is
bulky
this is
washing
this is
machines.
interesting because I'm giving a presentation here pretty soon. I'm talking about the wealth of nations and electricity and the wealth of nations. And one of my thoughts is, and it was one of the people who pushed for electrification here in the United States was getting women away from washing clothes by hand. And so, if you don't mind, I'm just curious, how important is that? I mean, you've seen this yourself. How important is it for women to have washing machines?
It's absolutely is important. I think households in India should be equipped with all modern kitchen and cleaning facilities. To avoid wastage of time and everything. I think we did a very interesting episode with Shalu Agarwal of CEW. and Hisham Zarifi of University of British Columbia for our own podcast, and they made this very interesting observation where they said that when electricity, when there is energy access in a household, there is a significant improvement in the socio-economic stature of the women in the family.
Right.
More than that, women then get to have something called their own time,
Yeah.
which they do not get, and that is so much important, and that is so much directly linked to their health metrics.
Sure.
Something I think is a link that is not focused much upon, that how important these little necessities of life are, because given the traditional setup of a typical middle or a lower middle class, or for that matter lower class society, families in India, is that it's the women who bear the burden of kitchen cleaning and other household thing, that major societal change is yet to come. So these kind of appliances, energy access, actually brings a lot of improvement in their own health and life standard, which I think should be focused a lot upon. Yeah.
I agree. The way I put it is electricity frees women and girls from the pump, the stove, and the wash tub.
Yep.
That this
Yeah,
is
very rightly said.
this is the key technology, but you have to have, and this was part of the electrification push in the U.S. was the government. Yes, they pushed for rural electrification, and then they pushed for low interest loans and programs that would allow women and farm and ranch people to buy washing machines and refrigerators. That they realized, well, electricity wasn't enough. You had to have the machines that the people could afford as well. So what then, let me talk about liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, because this is the other part of the challenge, right? I mean, we've talked about electricity, but the other issue is clean cooking fuels. And I saw myself when we were in South 24 Parganas and areas around there in Majlishpur and where we filmed in that area. A lot of people still using traditional biomass, wheat, dung, wood, wheat straw, rice straw, wood. How important is LPG or propane to women and girls in the home in India?
Yeah, I think there's a government statistics which says that now 75% of the households in this country do have an LPG connection, and this kind of growth was much needed in this country, because when you are using biomass as a cooking fuel, that again is a pressure on the women of the family to arrange for wood stakes or other source of biomass. So yeah, that is a major challenge. The LPG penetration has been pretty good according to government data. The government has run several schemes to introduce LPG into the Indian kitchens, but the success rate has been challenged by a lot of researchers, where they say that though LPG penetration has happened, LPG connections have taken place, because of the high cost of LPG or because of subsidy not reaching to the consumers directly, a lot of consumers do not go for a rebooking. So you might get a gas stove at your end, or you might get an LPG at your end, but price barrier or lack of subsidy stops you from booking a cylinder again. And second major problem, which is not highlighted a lot, is that while LPG penetration happens, there is a lack of awareness. There have been incidents where households in remote areas, in villages, do not know how to operate an LPG cylinder or a gas stove, and it has led to fatal mishaps. An awareness campaign is clearly missing. So if we have this very impressive number of LPG penetration into Indian households, I think there should be an awareness campaign along with it as well. But yeah, so far the growth has been pretty impressive in terms of LPG, at least. Yeah.
Gotcha. So let me just, as you're talking, I was thinking this is something you're obviously passionate about, energy issues, and you've been doing this a long time. So if I could wave a magic wand and say, well, Shreya Jai, I'm giving you the portfolio of improving India's energy situation, where would you put your focus first? What would you do if you had the money and the political power to make things happen? What would you do first in such a complex market, complex country like India? Where would you put your first focus?
Oh my God, I'll first of all return that portfolio. It
I would fire myself. That would be
yeah. My God, it's a complex job, and my job does entail criticizing policies, policymakers, but I do have huge respect for them because they have to handle such a large sector. But okay, let me think.
I put you on the spot here.
One thing I will do is just I think we discussed about power distribution companies. I'll just in one van, I'll just reform all of them. I'll just make all of them profit making. I would just put them in their head that create good infrastructure, stop giving free electricity. I think I'll do that. I'll just change the power distribution sector. It's like an itch, that something, everything is so nice, there's a good policy, and it gets stuck somewhere. So I think I'll just go and reform that distribution sector. And second thing that I mentioned is that I will cover all rooftops with solar.
Well, I think those are good places to start. I do like that idea of the ending the subsidies or ending the free electricity, because I think that it's essential. People, if they're going to use it, they have to pay for it. I think there's a part of as I think about the grid, people have to have some ownership attachment to it, right? That if they're going to depend on it, they need to have some allegiance to it and some feeling like they have some ownership, or that's not free. It can't be free because I think it's a mindset issue. And well, the government's going to do it. No. It is required to have some kind of system that makes people understand the utility and importance of it. And they only do that if they have to pay. That's anyway, my opinion. So listen,
Yeah.
we've been talking for a while. Just a few more questions. And again, my guest is Shreya Jai. She's talking to us from Delhi in India. She's an assistant editor at Business Standard. You can follow her on Twitter at Shreya Jai, Shreya _J, SHREYA _JAI. Great conversation here. Tell me who you admire in your work, and I was referred to you by Vijaya Ramachandran, who's been on the podcast, and we both have great admiration for her. When you look at these issues, whose work do you follow, and who do you like? Who do you admire in their thinking about energy and power systems?
Okay, that's
I've stumped you again now.
question. I did not note down names. And one peril of my daily reporting is that I get very, very less time to meet with people like Vijaya. This podcast did give me an opportunity to meet with such amazing set of people, especially women.
Yeah.
Now that you ask me, a big void that I feel during energy reporting is lack of women in high places. Where they should have been. We just talked about how energy access bring a change in the life of women. So why should not be women be the bosses out here? So let me quickly list some women only first.
Yes, of course.
Vijaya, yes, we mentioned one. I have recently closely interacted with Shalu Agarwal of CEW. Her work has been impressive, and she is always a delight to talk to. I've been lately in touch with Swati D'Souza as well. I am a complete novice when it comes to gas sector, and she has been so nice in explaining it to me.
What is her name again? I'm sorry.
Swati D'Souza. She is currently with the International Energy Agency. Another person whose work is very, very different, and I liked reading it, was her colleague in IEA, Siddharth Singh. We have talked in the past about urban electrification and how urbanization would change the electricity demand scenario in the country. So his work is something. On the government and policy front, I was for a very long time in touch with this lady who's currently in she's the district magistrate for I think Ghaziabad or somewhere. Her name is Ritu Maheshwari. some years back, she spearheaded the reforms in Kanpur, electricity reforms in Kanpur, and she was partially successful. Her work made it was made into a documentary, and I would suggest you to watch it. It's called Katia Baz. It's
Oh,
a
right, sure. The
very
the electricity thieves. Yeah,
Yep.
right. I've seen it. Yes.
Yeah. So the lady who is featured in there, the one who was the managing director of Kesco back then, Ritu Maheshwari, very feisty lady. I have always admired talking with her. She is currently not in the energy sector, but yeah, her work I did admire a lot. And she was here heading the transmission division of a government company. That's when also I interacted with her. So yeah, that's how I think I've listed.
No,
These are the handful of women that
that's
I've
great.
interacted with. Yeah.
It's one of the things that I realize in my own podcast that I talk to a lot of people who look like me, right? And I want to, and I'm bored with me. But I want to talk with more women. And so that's one of my goals. So I'm glad to get those thoughts from you. So just a couple of more things. So what are you reading? I know you're busy and there's a lot to do, but do you have any books that you're reading these days? Any particular authors that you follow?
No particular author as such that I follow, and currently I'm so sorry I'm not reading anything related to the energy sector. I'm reading two very interesting books by journalists again. Sorry, not here to promote my coterie, but I just somehow ended up reading them. One is called "Despite the State" by M. Rajshekhar. It talks about how something that we also talked about, that reforms start but never reach till the very end. Something that Rajshekhar has tried to address it in his books. He has taken example of 5 states and tried to showcase how democracy or reforms fail the Indian public. And second
And the title again is "Despite the State."
Yes.
Yeah, good. No, that's interesting. Yeah. Good.
And second is a book by Josie Joseph. It's called The Silent Coup. I've just started reading it, but I'm really looking forward to it. Josie is a great journalist, and his earlier book, Feast of Vultures, was a great insight into investigative journalism, and I'm hoping to pick up some more notes in his new books.
And,
so
and
yeah, these two I'm currently
the Silent Coup is the title.
Yeah.
Okay.
And apart from that, my side reading is fiction, crime fiction, especially by Irish authors, Scottish authors. Arnaldo Lindra's Son is my current favorite, so I tend to pick up.
And who was the crime author? What was that last name?
I pardon my pronunciation. It's called Arnaldo Indra the Son.
Arnaldo. Okay. What's the title? Can you give a title?
Okay, I am currently reading Voices or Silence of the Grave. You can Google these two.
Silence of the Grave. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, those are good recommendations. I'm writing them down myself. So last question, Shreya, what gives you hope? I mean, you've been traveled a lot in India and you've seen a lot of change, but you also see the challenges, and they're big for a country as diverse and complex as India. What gives you hope as you look at all this stuff?
One thing that gives me hope probably would be that people are getting more informed. And when people are more informed, they make informed choices. And when they make informed choices, you get better leaders, you get better criticism for policies, you get better pushback to bad policies, and you get acceptance for good policies. So I think that is a little bit of change that I am witnessing now. I think social media has a huge role to play in that. But still, I think, people becoming informed will be a big change in a democracy like India. And second thing that I'm very, very hopeful of, because this is something that I'm witnessing, people from my school and college batch and my peers, people in my age group, coming to fore, taking up positions in public administration, actively trying to participate in public discourse. I think that will bring a lot of change. I think given that the country is in its prime youth, that youth is trying to channelize its energy into better public discourse, is trying to, take up roles, take up jobs into public distribution. I would just summarize it and say that they are trying to be change makers. Uh, and I think it could be channelized much better if there are larger employment opportunities in the country. But nevertheless, I think the young are very excited, very driven, self-driven, self-motivated, and I think that should initiate some sort of change in the country. That's my hope.
Sure. Well, that's great. Well, we can end there. My guest has been Shreya Jai. You can find her on Twitter at Shreya Jai, Shreya_J, Shreya, a million thanks for being on the Power Hungry podcast. I've enjoyed it and glad to revisit India from afar. It was a beautiful country, and I love the people there, and it's great to connect with you.
Thank you so much. It was so fun to talk with you. There's so many things that I didn't think that we will touch upon, but we did. So thanks for your question. And next time you're here, do come. I would love to be your host.
That's very kind. Thank you. So thanks to Shreya Jai. You can find her. She's an assistant editor at Business Standard. She's on Twitter. She's easy to find. And thanks to all of you in podcast land for tuning into this episode of the Power Hungry podcast. Until the next one, see ya.